Well, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome. We are so happy you could join us here for our weekly sense-making conversation. This is our virtual lunch and learn. Last week, we got together and we talked about some great tips around managing anxiety. And as we were doing that, of course, we were looking at what was happening out there in the world. When we got together just a week ago, there were just over 500,000 cases of the COVID-19 virus reported worldwide. Today, we've doubled that number. And here in Canada, a week ago, we were at 4,000 cases reported. Today, we've tripled that. We're at over 12,000. So it's safe to say that when we look at what's happening in the world and as we're trying to sense make of what's actually happening, we're going to be talking about this pandemic for the next month or so. And we're all learning how to live a new normal. Most of us are working from home, and we're getting used to this video technology and the realities of communicating this way. I've seen a bunch of memes popping up, I'm sure all of you have, around the distractions of video communications. And whether it's the family pet suddenly joining the call unexpectedly, or the distraction of what's behind your meeting mates, because suddenly we're all in each other's homes. But distractions aside, in many of these meetings, you may be being asked to make decisions, because that's what's happening right now in the world. We're all having to make decisions. And these are difficult decisions often, decisions that require a lot of information. And you may not have that information available, or you may not be able to get it. And many of us are making decisions around reinventing ourselves, our businesses, or what it is we offer. This is a real challenge, especially when we're all learning a new way of working, communicating, and interacting. Our new normal is being created as we speak. So what we really need are some strategies that can be easily learned and implemented to help you make decisions quickly and confidently. Our speaker today, Jill McAbe, is a high-performance business expert. She is the #1 Amazon best-selling author of It's Go Time, the all-in system for unstoppable success in business and life, and a highly sought-after business coach. Jill's expertise is in helping people with professional skills or hobbies build successful online teaching and coaching businesses that generate passive income. Welcome, Jill.
Thank you so much for inviting me here today and for a lovely introduction and what I think a discussion around a very important topic, one that over the last decade I became an expert in by accident. There's really two topics going on here. These decisions, these important decisions that we need to make, and then is one of those decisions reinvention of ourselves, our businesses, what we sell, our products, how are we living in the world? And it can be very hard to make really great decisions, especially without a decision-making tool. I became an accidental expert in the first topic, in how to reinvent yourself, because I had been hit by a car 10 years ago. That upended my life, and it was a 1.5 years of rehab. And just like is sort of happening in the world today, and everybody's life is being upended at the same time, my life was upended, and that caused me to do a lot of soul searching, me to do a lot of like, what am I meant to do on this planet? And it took me years to kind of figure out what to do, right? How did I make that key decision? Playing alongside that was the experiences of my clients. I was an operations expert for entrepreneurs, helping them kind of tune up their businesses. And I noticed I'd be struggling with all these decisions. And so would they. I'd be like, what should I do? And how do I do it? And all this stuff. And they'd be in their businesses, you know, without all this crisis going on, also struggling with decisions. So I ended up just doing a lot of research, as I do when I get curious about a topic, and coming up with a decision-making model I call ABC decisions. And I love how easy it is because it's easy to remember. I've been now teaching that decision-making model in executive education to my clients who work with me, who are putting their businesses online. And it's a model that you can use every single day to make superior decisions and to navigate uncertainty. And even within uncertainty, figure out things at any given point, right? We're faced with choice, and we all want to make the best choices at those points. So I'm here today to have a quick, I'll do a quick overview of this system, and then we'll have a chat afterwards about it with some Q&A. So you can ask me specific questions. I'm going to first very quickly touch on there are real problems with how we approach decision making. As I started to study decision making and learn about it, one of the things that surprised me the most was that typically we don't start with the right questions. So I'm going to cover a few of the problems that we are having when we are making decisions, particularly important ones. And then, of course, I'm going to go through the ABCD model for you so that you have a way by the end of just these few minutes that we're spending together over lunch, that you have a way of going into your afternoon and thinking about an important decision that you need to make today, this week, or soon. So the problems. The very first problem that leads us to poor decisions is actually how we ask the question. A lot of people are asking questions like, should I do this or should I do that? That question, should I do this? Or actually, I'm going to start with, should I do this or not, right? Should I do this or not? That's a question we ask. Should I or shouldn't I? Well, the research, really good research shows us that question will lead you to a failing outcome 50% of the time. It's a terrible first question, which is it kind of makes sense. It's so closed-minded. It hasn't really seen the options. And yet I know I've asked that question many times. I know my clients have. It's a natural question to ask. So we won't go into that because of time, but just like if you ever hear yourself saying, should I or shouldn't I, right away that's actually, it's time to change the question. And I'll give you ideas about that in a sec. Because the second question, which is only marginally better than the first, is to say, should I do this or that? And that's another thing. We all have these ideas of dichotomies, right? Should I keep working here or go here? Should I do this or do that? Should we add this product or should we add that product or not? Those two options are still leaving you with only a 33% success rate. And or a 66% success rate, sorry. So they're going to fail you 33% of the time. Much better than a should I or shouldn't I question, but still not great. What really happens when we're looking at those questions, and I'm gonna come back to that as I go through the ABCD model. I'm gonna help you understand how you can ask better questions so that you end up making better decisions for yourself. The next thing that really affects us when it comes to decision making is biases. Biases, we all have heard of biases, and a lot of my work is around, I ended up studying sort of neuroscience underpinnings of how we operate in the world because I'm so fascinated by performance. And biases, I think most of us have heard that biases are these there are ideas about the world that are formed from our past. So we, let's just say if anybody out there is an entrepreneur, right? There's one really common one. There are ideas that we have that sort of frame our ability to make good choices. And one example would be being an entrepreneur is hard, right? So there might be this idea out there that being an entrepreneur is hard. And I have noticed in my work with entrepreneurs and talent-based business owners over the years that anyone who believes that being an entrepreneur is hard has a hard life as an entrepreneur. But people who actually are open-minded to say, actually, it can be very liberating and freeing, are able to create much better businesses. That's just one example of thousands. But pretty much our experience in the world so far limits us to understanding things that we haven't encountered yet. And it's hard for us to see beyond our own experiences. So biases are a big one. And I'll be teaching you in the ABCD model how to move past your current knowledge and experience into gaining and getting more information than you might realize is currently available to you. And then the risk of emotion is the next problem I'm going to talk about. Risk of emotion is a big one. It's there's been some very interesting research. To cut to the chase on this, the more neutral you can be around a decision, the more likely you are to make a great one. And that making decisions from a place of heightened emotion, and that could be positive, negative. Like if we're all exuberant about something, that's like, oh my God, this is gonna be the best thing ever. That's like, ooh, like that can lead to not so good decisions. Or if we're all angry and we're making a decision in anger, that can also do the same. But it also from a place of ego, any sort of overconfidence, like I'm sure this is the right thing. These are all things I want you to watch out for that, again, sort of pull you away from great decisions. So what science has shown is that, there are some people who, in the case of decision making, are fortunate, have muted emotions. Their ability to feel emotions is much lower than what would be considered normal or average. And probably average, we'll say, because they have different abilities. And what's interesting is they tend to do much better on the stock market. They tend to just make better decisions. And there's lots of research that shows that emotions and decisions are two things that great decisions that don't actually go well together. And then finally, and this one, I know my clients always like moan when I tell them this one, but pros and cons. Pros and cons are a terrible decision-making tool. And I was so shocked when I found that out. I was like, what? That's like the only decision-making tool I know. How could that be so bad? And it's actually not a great decision-making tool because what pros and cons do, apparently, research has shown, is help us identify our biases. So if you write a pros and cons list for the purpose of being able to see your own biases, then it's a very effective tool. But if you write it to help you make a better decision, it's not. It's actually just a way of seeing your biases, which is almost proof that there was information out there that you could have gained that you don't have yet. So what do? We use my ABC decisions model. And in this point, I'm gonna, do as much as I can to contextualize, to, reinvent yourself, but we need to do that also in the Q&A after. So I hope you're coming up with some great questions for the Q&A. A lot of times, so A stands for, very quickly, the ABCD model. A stands for align with what you want. B stands for broaden your options. C stands for compare contenders, and D stands for detach and decide. So A, align with what you want. It is really alarming to me that I think, humanity, because I just worked with people from so many cultures through executive education sessions that I run or working with clients, that we often are constantly asking about making decisions. And then if I stop and say, so what do you want? Like at the end of that decision, the answer isn't automatic. And so if you're asking yourself a question right now, like, should you do this or should you do that? And I know you're going to change that question soon, but if you're asking yourself a question right now and you say, okay, so what do I want to have the outcome be? And you can't immediately answer that. Like you have to think about it. That means that you're not aligned enough with what you want for yourself afterwards. When it comes to deciding to reinvent yourself, what that might look like. And when I reinvented myself 3 times, because I got good at reinvention because I got it wrong twice. So I reinvented myself 3 times in a decade and finally figured out how to do it. But you might be surprised if you're deciding on your business, this might not feel like a time to stop and actually get grounded, but it really might be. And you can align with questions like, what makes me happy? Like really, what makes us feel good? What work makes us feel proud? What contribution to others makes us feel great? Anything like that. You can do things like think to yourself, what values do I want to uphold? You can consider a number of values, and you can think to yourself, well, what kind of values are important? You can also think about your needs. You can think about, like, what are my needs short term? As a company, you might have real needs short term, and you might, and then you also want to think about your needs long term. What are my needs long term? Almost always in business, we're making this trade-off between short term and long term. A lot of times when we do and make decisions that meet short-term needs, it can be at the expense of a more strategic long-term play. I had 2 people come to me this week. One was in an events business, and that's clearly a business that's been really devastated by the current situation. And right there, we're dealing with a really there's that business is not coming back, right, for a while, and they work with some enormous clients. So we started looking at what they were going to do long term, because short term there was really nothing. Another person in a real estate business came to me who has a very successful business with a large team, and we started kind of going, well, short term, can you wait? Can you wait? It's not comfortable to wait. Nobody wants to wait, but this will come back. So really thinking about your short and long term, and not trading your long term for your short term, because I think a lot of times we want things better now, but we are doing that at the expense of the future. So if you can wait and use this time to build and strengthen, that's something to consider. And if your business is going to be offline for like probably the better part of a year, then no, you've got to figure something out. So those are some quick ideas. And then with aligning, you just want to ask and answer, like, what is your ultimate outcome that you want? What is the ultimate outcome you want? And typically when I ask that question with my clients, we're always looking at what's the outcome you want for you and you or your business, whether you work alone or you're part of an organization, and what's the outcome you want for all the constituents. And so that might be the outcome you want for team members or people who work for you, and constituents being any like suppliers, clients. So usually try to think about what do you want, and then try to think about what you want for each of the constituents involved in your situation. And that can help get you aligned about where you're trying to get, which is, I'm confident, because I've done this with so many people, going to profoundly, just that A step will profoundly change your ability to make better decisions, because you're more clear on what you want to have be the outcome. So that's align with what you want. Now there is broaden your options. I do have some little cheat sheets here, so I remember to cover all the important stuff. So broaden your options. This can be, this is going to be really important in these times in particular, right? Because as Andrea said, as she introduced this session, sometimes it feels like that information isn't even out there. Right? Like, it's like, where's this information? How am I going to get it? Nobody knows what's happening. Everybody wants to help navigate it, but nobody knows where we're going. And it's so true. I mean, I think there's this information, but still, when it comes to your decisions, you probably have more information than you realize available. There's information about ourselves that we're, you know how when you're so much better at being able to see, like, you have a friend who has a problem and you can totally see it. You're like, I completely see what's going on. But when it comes to yourself, like, we tend to be blind. That's why, you don't want to be your own doctor. You don't want to be your own coach. You don't want to be your own anything, because we don't have that insight. So here are some questions that can help you. If you are asking ever a question like, should I do this or this? Okay, one of the first things I want you to think to yourself is, can I do both, right? Is there any way that both of these things are possible? That's a really powerful question, and oftentimes it is. I was speaking, another one of my past clients called me to kind of, before I was just focusing on helping people get online, I worked in a lot of service and talent-based industries. And this was a chiropractor kind of going like, I'm done. What do I do? How do I navigate this situation? and I can't do chiropractic online or whatever. And in this case, we started looking at the next question in Broaden Your Options, which is, what could I do if this was no longer an option for me? So we don't know when it's going to be possible for chiropractors to get back to work. And chiropractors need to touch people. We can't, it's not like a coach who can just kind of shoot, okay, I'm online now, or even a music teacher. It's like, wow, it's like, how does she do that? So we looked at the question, what could I do if I couldn't do this any longer? And as many chiropractors are, this is a multi-talented professional, like just so many skills. And you know, within about 15 minutes, we came up with some services that would be of real value to her community. Are they chiropractic services? They're not, okay? They're not a part of the college, and they won't be able to, you know, her patients will not be able to claim them through the college, but she was able to think of a price that her patients would probably be able to afford. And she was able to think of services that would probably be deeply meaningful to people who were alone and having certain types of pain that she could help with online. So is it everything that she could do? No, but it was something. The next one, and I think this is, the next one, I think I'm going to go, and we'll finish with this one on Broaden Your Options, will be what data could support me? If you've ever been in a situation, and I know you have been, so I don't know why I said that, where it's like analysis paralysis. It's like, like either you're alone and like the same thing is going over and over in your head, or you're having the same conversation at the dinner table, or in meetings, people are just like wandering aimlessly. The very first thing I want you to know is that's like a siren. Any analysis paralysis is a siren. It actually says two things. It says, one, you're not aligned to an outcome. So go back to step one, align. Like, wait a second, what are we trying to achieve here? I promise you'll be like, oh yeah, that helps. Two, there's often not enough data. So let's say you are trying to reinvent yourself or your business. Of course, I'm more familiar with talent-based businesses online these days, but if you were trying to reinvent something like that, but if you're trying to figure out what kind of business to go in, whether it be, you know, a franchise or buy a business or start a business or add a new product line to your business, you'd really want to start with research. You'd want to get, what happens a lot of time is we have biases about what a business is like. And I'll just say in the case of like an online business, because that's my expertise, a lot of times people think putting a business online has a lot to do with like putting a course online. And it's like, that's almost like a painful thing to do if you don't know how to do it. You want to find out more holistically. People, you know, are underinformed when they do lots of types of businesses. So if you are considering options, you know, my advice is to learn as much as you can about each of those options before, you know, making the final D, as we like to say. I like to say final D. I don't know if you guys do too. It's a fun expression. So those are some ways that you can broaden your options. You can look at, is there any way you could do both? You could ask yourself the question, if I couldn't do this anymore, what could I do? And you can make sure you have enough data. If you are putting options on the table, right, dig into those a little bit and find out everything you can from someone who's succeeded in those areas before. Make sure you're always collecting data from people who have succeeded. And with options, you want 3. You really want 3. The next 2 are pretty quick. We've got compare contenders and detach and decide. Compare contenders is what I'm going to invite you to do instead of that pros and cons, right? So pros and cons, you know, we all know what pros and cons are, I believe. So compare contenders is actually where you look at each of your options that you've selected and broaden your options, and you want at least 3 great options. Oh, please don't try to make a decision before you have 3 great options. Like really 3 options, you're like, wow, those could all be really good. Look at each one of your options and then think about what you're aligning to in step 1 and try to make a positive case for each one. Well, what would have to be true for this to be my best option? And try to actually convince yourself, like be sort of the attorney protecting that. idea and make a case that would support each one of your ideas. Don't worry about the negative. Like, this would have to be true and this would have to be true. And that is, that will help you see things in a more balanced way, and finally detach and decide. Decisions made from a place of emotion, whether, and I'll add one more emotion in here that I didn't mention earlier. Sometimes it's overconfidence that something will work. I don't think anyone's feeling overconfident. I'm pretty sure that's not a vibe in the world right now, but you know, I am speaking about a tool that works in this situation and also broadly. Overconfidence is something you want. If you're like, I'm sure this will work, it's probably, that's actually a sign of emotion. And another big piece of emotion is embarrassment that it might not work, right? So sometimes we make a decision based on this fear of the future that something might not work out, so we don't make a great decision today. So just notice that one, because that can stop us from making great decisions. And what you really want to do is take that time and detach. And oftentimes detaching emotionally comes from finding a sense of peace about what you have to do before you step forward. If you can give yourself the gift of detaching and really trying to find a place of emotional stability before you make that final decision from your 3 great options that are aligned to what you really want, you'll make a better decision. And if that decision is about, are you reinventing yourself or your business or your products, these are decisions that are going to have long-term effects on your life and outcome and of people in your life, and giving them that time and space. I really encourage you to do that. So that's what I had to say quickly about that topic. Reinventing yourself and ABC decisions.
Thanks so much, Jill. That was really, really helpful. We've got about 15 minutes left, 15, 17 minutes. And so we've got some time for some questions. So I'm going to encourage everyone who's been listening to go ahead and drop their questions right into the Q&A section or into the chat, whichever is easy for you. But what there was so many things there I took notes on. I was quickly jotting things down as you were talking. And I got to say, one of my favorite ones was the question of, when you have 2 decisions, can you have both? Love that idea. First of all, because the next time I'm shoe shopping, I'm going to ask myself that question.
And it's going to be a while from now. So you're going to deserve 2 pairs. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But in all seriousness, we're in some pretty difficult times right now.
Yeah, we are.
People are actually facing decisions that they truly can't have both, and they need to make those decisions, and they need to evaluate their options. So how would you help us to, make that decision when it is between 2 impossible problems, and that you really do have to choose one?
So I'm going to say, because I've worked with clients in large organizations prior to doing the work that when I switched my business online 3 years ago, and now I work with smaller businesses, but even in larger ones, I have literally never seen a situation where we couldn't do both. I just haven't. If you did, and usually when I say, could you do both? It's not both exactly as you've imagined it. It's sometimes, and it's not a compromise either. It's sometimes like, so for instance, let's take the chiropractor I just spoke to. It's not about not being a chiropractor anymore. It's about discovering that there is this new way, this new income stream. It's almost like a new product that probably would continue even when she got back to doing full-time chiropractic, because it's so valuable. So at first it was like, just couldn't see any options. And then, but it's not necessarily like, am I online or am I in real life? It's like, well, what if you're doing both? Right. So in that case, but if you really, really, really couldn't decide, I'd say, first of all, talk to like 5 people and see if they come up with ideas. And actually, I'd say, go to my next question. If this wasn't an option, what else would I do? Because that can force us to think of new things. But if you really can't do both, just align. ABC decisions really works like a charm. Just align to what you want, compare contenders, and use the compare contenders, cheering for each of those ideas, trying to make each of them work, and the winner will emerge.
I love that. I love that you're saying that mostly there's always we can do both. And I think what I love about
10 years of experience, tells me that.
What I love about what you said there, and I think it's a really important point for, our listeners to think about, is that, often when we're comparing these two seemingly different things, is that there's more similarities between them than we realize. And so when we look at doing both, it forces us into that. So I love that idea of really looking at those options. And if I think about where we are today in the world, and as I, started off talking about the update with where the virus is right now and what's happening, emotions are running high. Emotions are running exceptionally high. And many of us are having to make decisions with our businesses and with our lives that we're, that are highly emotional, because we're connected to the things we do and to the way in which we live. And you mentioned, we should just, become dispassionate, take the emotion out of it. And that's a little easier said than done. So tell me, how do we do that?
That's fair. Well, time, how sometimes, that whole thing, you can sort of go to bed angry and wake up feeling better. Time. So heightened emotions can in fact be a result of cortisol, and cortisol, if it is released in your body, does have a 24-hour window. You might be getting a new shot of cortisol every time you turn on the news or listen to something. So time away from stress triggers can be one thing. That 24 hours of dissipation, giving yourself time. If you meditate, that's the time to do it. Time, space, breathing, meditation. Sometimes what helps get us out of emotion is imagining the worst thing that can happen. It can seem counterintuitive, but sometimes we're like, well, what's the worst thing that can happen? And we're like this. And it's like, well, I could rebound from that. And all of a sudden, something doesn't sound as scary. When I first went online, I was like, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? It's like, I was so afraid of putting stuff online. And then it's like, well, I could get panned in a review, and that would be so embarrassing. And then I was. And it was terrible. And now I have like 14,000 students online and 98% positive reviews. So sometimes like we're so afraid of these things, and it's like, yeah, but it was like the gateway to something really good that happens. It's just playing that out. When we're afraid of fear and thinking about fear, even in this current situation, I have a sick mom, she's not actively sick, but she's had very compromised immune, so clearly concerned about her, but still have to think about the worst thing that could happen. And then how would I act in that case? How would I make the best of it? I'm always going to try to think, Andrea, optimism is so misunderstood. Optimism is so misunderstood. I actually, as I got better from my car accident, I was not optimistic. I was actually pessimistic, depressed, and isolated. I isolated myself. I was very sad for a number of years. And so I read a lot of books on optimism to try to prove myself. But what I learned was that optimism is not what we think. It's not necessarily like a glass half full or a glass half empty. It's, let's say it's an 8-ounce glass. It's actually looking at the 8-ounce glass. And this is clinical optimism as it's studied by psychologists. It's saying, oh, there's 4 ounces of water in that glass. How do I fill it up? So it's someone who looks at a scenario quite honestly and tries to make the best of it. It's not someone who sees the best in badness. It's someone who looks at how we turn this into something good. And it can be challenging, but that's what it is. So those are some ideas that I have. I hope that helps.
Yeah, that helps a lot. Sorry, I apologize.
Kitty cat.
I have a kitty cat who keeps wanting to join the call. I think she has questions for you.
Of course.
So that's really helpful. I mean, I think, so I'm just going to sort of reiterate it the way that I heard it. So it's when we find ourselves in these highly emotionally charged moments of having to make a decision, it's equally as important to step away from the decision, to find a place where we can have some calm, where we can find the optimism, but where we can also look at it dispassionately. So taking it to a place of, where's the worst case? Where's the best case? And just feeling both of those.
Yeah.
So that when we are actually making the decision, we're clear that it's not from a place of emotions, but from a place of the reality of what the outcome could or may be.
Yeah.
And so we're making good decisions based on fact and based on what we know and based on an optimistic view of it that is based in fact.
And based on what we want, because that's the biggest one we forget to say. What do we want, right? What's going to bring me joy? What's going to make me happy? What's going to make this organization happy? And it's beyond money. Making it for money alone, there's no such thing as money. That's a false dichotomy, money or meaning. It's a total false dichotomy. It's the best and most profitable businesses embrace both.
Trina Brooks, who's on the call, she had asked a question. She just answered it, but I just want to ask it anyway, because I think there might be some nuances in it that are important. So Trina asks, I'm struggling with emotions around a decision. How do I tell the difference between passionate about a choice or emotional baggage? And that's to me, there's a really nice difference there from what we were just talking about, which is emotions versus the bias or the emotion, the baggage that I'm bringing into it that actually, it probably translates to emotions, but it's actually a bit different. Do you agree?
Well, I think we're getting back to another term for biases. Right? Like these are like the formed, so repeat the question.
So she's struggling with the emotions around this decision. How do we tell the difference between being passionate about a choice or having emotional baggage around that choice? And then she went on to say, I've always wanted to write a novel, but wondering if it's just vanity that holds me back from pursuing my real writing. So there's the emotional baggage. Is it vanity, or is it, is there something emotional that's holding me back there?
Well, that gets into, there's a lot of my work with my client, almost all of my work with my clients is around subconscious blocks, right? So that's, we can't build great businesses until we break through the barriers that are limiting those from happening. So that really is getting into a much deeper level because, if we're looking at it from the context of how to detach and decide, at that point, you're going to want to try to understand and discover what your biases are, right? So what sort of biases are maybe informing this thing around the novel, right? It's like, oh, well, why do I want to write a novel, right? Do I want to write a novel to be famous? Well, that might create this. So a lot of people who, when I start working with them, they're like, they want to be famous. They do. And that somehow creates this thing where their businesses don't work. And as soon as we remove that and we start focusing on writing the novel because you have a story that people really need to read, and as soon as we focus on writing a novel for the consumers of that novel who have something that would fascinate them, that it's a story only you can tell, that becomes this thing of service. And I can't tell you how many people have created these amazing businesses or creative projects, because a lot of people I work with are coaches or artists, and they've done it by actually forgetting about recognition, forgetting about fame, and just going, who do I want to do this for? And why am I passionate about that? And all of a sudden, magic starts to happen. I can't tell you how many times I've seen that. It's incredible.
So this is a related question, and Teresa, who's on the call as well, has just asked this. And I love this. How long should we stew on a decision before giving it up or taking it on, especially now that emotions are so volatile, and one day we see everything as positive and the next day, well, we don't believe anything will work out. So this idea of stewing on a decision before giving it up or taking it on.
So I really encourage you to go through the ABCD process, because what will happen is we tend to stew on decisions when we don't have enough options. So I really think coming back to those, broaden your, like align to what you want and broaden your options. In the case of this, I definitely, the verb stew, I guess, which is great, which is so true about how we approach things. I really, I get that, but it's not a place from which to make a decision. But the question itself illustrates almost a need to go through ABCD, because when you align to what you want, let's say you decide, you know what, this is going to be, you know, let's face it, a lot of people, just because I know from my work, have been questioning what they were doing prior to this situation, right? This situation is going to speed up a lot of decisions that were already being asked, right? Or questions that were already being asked, because all of a sudden it's this like soul searching amount of time. There's this wonderful, I do meditate, you know, so there's David G. He's an amazing meditation teacher, and he has a SoundCloud, and it's free and it's so good. And he has this one meditation, taking your life to the next level, possibly. It's free. And in it, he says, am I willing, I can't remember his exact quote, but am I willing to let the mud settle, right? Before, the concept is before I rise. And it's just this beautiful thing. For the longest time, I felt stuck. I felt I couldn't move forward. I felt like my dreams were never going to happen. And then I would listen to that meditation and go, yeah, I'm willing to let the mud settle. So if you're not a meditator, that's not that helpful, but because hopefully the concept is, though, that really thinking about, well, look, I'm still on this planet. And as long as I'm here, I'm here. You know, I can't live in this fear that I'm not going to be here, because I am here. So assuming that I'm going to be here, what would I want? And then making the decision with the information we do have. And so if assuming that I am here, do I want to live in fear, or do I want to live in a place of constructive things for myself and my loved ones and my community? And then if so, what are my options for, well, what would that look like? And so for me, I had a successful career prior to my car accident. But after my car accident, I was like, wrong life, wrong everything, wrong career, wrong everything. And after my car accident, I couldn't let myself do the wrong thing anymore. The problem is I didn't know what the right thing was. And it took me, by the way, guys, I need to do this. I'm sorry, Andrea, I'm going to do this. I wrote a book about this. I wrote a book about a system for navigating personal and professional growth that was the accumulation of 10 years of my journey and wanting to shorten that track for others, so that if you are feeling like you're stewing, if you are feeling like you just don't know what to do, I just wrote that book. It just got released in March. So that is something that's, I hope that's helpful to some degree. I think, yeah.
Thank you. So I'll just summarize that quickly, and because we're just about out of time.
Yeah.
So basically what I heard you say was, first of all, make sure that you've got all the options, because if you're stewing about something, it could be that you haven't looked at all the options.
Yeah.
But if you're satisfied that you do have all those options, then find a way to take the emotion out of it, because stewing is an emotion. And so. Yeah. So meditation or sitting with it, or, you know, sort of just finding the way to do that. And then using the options you have, all the information you have, make the decision, just step into it. But do it from a place of dispassionate confidence. And if you haven't already got a copy of Jill's book, you might want to think about that. And Jill has actually given us a very generous offer. She has offered up her time to talk to you, to see if some of the work that she does might be interesting or helpful for you. So she is offering a phone call for anyone who is interested in speaking directly to her about some of the work that she does, and some of the tools and frameworks that she uses. So we're going to send out a link in the email that's going to go out this afternoon to Jill. So if you are interested in speaking directly with her, it'll be a link to her calendar, so you can book a time with her. And that is all the time we have today. So this has been an absolute pleasure, Jill. Thank you so much for giving of your time and of your expertise to the panel, to the group today. We've had an amazing time, and I feel better able to make some decisions. And, you know, God knows it has been a week of decisions, and I'm sure next week will be the same. So thank you to all of you who have stayed on the call. And we wish you a wonderful weekend. And we like to say, stay safe, stay healthy, stay connected. And we look forward to seeing you next week during our virtual speakers series, starting on Tuesday with our Changemaker 20, which is 20 minutes with a Changemaker, going through Tuesday to Thursday, and then next Friday with our virtual Lunch and Learn. We'll be sending out the schedule later today. Looking forward to seeing you all there. Take care. Bye now.